Hello, everybody. We're listening to the description of the first life form in the universe. It's actually not Brahma, it's previous to Brahma, but it's not a typical type of an individual. It's a prototype life form um, developed by a being who's not really going to take an active role in the universe. The Paramatma. He's going to take a supporting role in the universe. And this prototype life form establishes what we would probably these days call genetic codes and cellular structures, etc., that can be used by living things to assemble all the various kinds of life forms that the universe can eventually um, support. So, hello, everybody. And let's jump into it so that we can make some progress. So, the first thing to evolve is the mouth. And then what you're doing is the amazing part here is, okay, now the individual components of the universe evolved. That's amazing, but the more difficult thing was to get them to combine. So now what you just see is how the divine power will connect to the tool, which will connect to a sensible type of an object, like a tasteable object, a seeable object, etc. So you're going to get the three columns, if you remember the columns of evolution, which was the tamasic column that generated objects, and then the rajasic column that generated tools and to perceive and interact with the objects, and then the sattvic column, which generated powers to utilize the tools. You'll see those three columns can now combine and braid up. So first it braids up on the mouth, and the name of that divine power is Agni. Then it braids on the taste in the mouth also. So and then the sensory tool there is not the mouth, but the taste and the tongue. Then you get a nose. The nose evolved in the divine faculty of respiration. Ashvini enters it. Then the nose binds with the power of respiration so that the function of smelling can happen. Eyes. So eyes are fairly late, actually, in the evolutionary changes. First two things is mouth and nose, and then eyes. So I guess it's still early, but I don't know if this is evolutionary or not. Let's just see what happens. A nose evolved in the divine faculty of respiration. Okay, blah, blah. Eyes evolved in the divine faculty of radiance. Twashta. Twashta is one of the references to a solar energy. The divine faculty of radiance enters the eyes. This my chitra is very sparkly and acute. This is very annoying for me that my vision is going bad because my most prominent planet's in Chitra. I don't really want to see things fuzzy. Nerves evolved in the skin, and divine faculty of movement, Anila, entered them, lending the ability to touch by sensing the movement in the air. Ears evolved in the divine faculty of spatial dimension, Disha, permeated them, leading to the perfection known as hearing. So now it's describing this as a perfection or a siddhi or power. The divine powers in the sattvic column are siddhis. You don't think of this all the time. You always think of, oh, so-and-so yogi had a siddhi, he could float. And this other yogi had a siddhi, she could pull apples off a tree 10 miles away. But you're full of siddhis. Just the ability to hear, see, speak, move. Those are all siddhis, yogic siddhis, and display of divine power. It's just that it's not unusual siddhi. Fine hairs evolved in the skin, and the divine faculty of herbal medicine permeated them, leading the ability to sense through perception of pleasure. So let's see. There's a footnote here. tactile sense has two functions. This is similar to the mouth. The mouth has two functions, to speak and to taste. The tactile sense has two functions. The skin itself senses, but this is different actually. This is one sense performing two functions. The mouth has two senses in it. The tactile sense does two things. It feels with the skin and also with the hairs. So I know people will always be like, God, why do I have body hair? I think I probably mentioned this before, but you have the perfect kind of body hair to have is the fine, easily moved hairs, because that enables the sense of touch to do its second function. The ones that are useless are the ones that are too thick to move very easily. So the tactile sense has two functions. One, the skin itself senses friction. The skin itself senses friction. And the hairs on the skin sense fine variations in pressure. So basically, the hair is the fine part of the sensation of touch. It's not the hair itself which feels it, of course, but it's the roots of the hair which are hooked up to the nervous system. But the antenna is the hair that comes out. That's the finer sense of touch, and then the more basic sense of touch is done by the skin. Then other senses evolve. What's wrong, Ms. Vinay? Genitalia evolved, and the divine faculty of reproduction, ka, permeated them, lending reproductive fluid and pleasure. And anus evolved, and the divine faculty of bonding, mitra, dwelt there, lending the ability to evacuate wastes. We talked about this before. Hands evolved, and the divine faculty of... See, what happened before was Shuka was answering Parikshit's question about this kind of stuff, so he was just referencing this thing that he had learned in the conversation between Mitra and Vidura. Now, they asked him to give the full detail of the conversation, so again, he's revisiting these topics. Hands evolved, and the divine faculty of control, Indra, entered them, lending the ability to give and take. Oh. I'm sorry too, but it's what happens when you get old. Feet evolved, and the divine faculty of pervasiveness permeated them, lending locomotion. Now you get into it's kind of a new category of things. We're going to get out of the physical senses and into the paraphysical senses, transphysical senses. Intellect evolved, and the divine faculty of verbal mastery, Vag, entered it. So you may be wondering why Agni is in the mouth. Where's poor old Vak? Vak has a higher place. That's why Vak is Saraswati, and Vak is not just speech, but it's intelligence. So intellect evolves, and who permeates? Who is the power of intellect? The power of the hands is Indra. Who is the power of the intellect? It's Vak. Intellect evolved, and the divine faculty of verbal mastery entered it, lending the ability to comprehend ideas. So there's two departments in speech as well. The one is the actual production of the sounds in the mouth and the vocal cords, which is going on according to this description by Agni's primordial power, because fire has the power of transference. And then there's the second part of speech communication is the coding and decoding of words, sounds, gestures. That goes on in the intellect under the power of Vak. An emotional center evolved. So an intellectual center evolves first because it actually has to process. It doesn't only process what comes in through the ears. It processes what comes in through the eyes, the sound, the feeling, everything. It processes all the input, and then also figures out how to output. That's what intellect does. So it actually manifests first because it's directly connected to the senses, and it's also considered a Rajaguna column of an evolute. The intellect is because it's one of the tools. An emotional center evolves next, and the divine faculty of reflection, Chandra, enters it, lending the ability to reflect upon emotions and convictions. So the mind then is the emotion, is the sense for perceiving emotion. A sense of doership evolved, and the divine faculty of pride, Abhiman, pervaded it, lending the motivation of self-interest. So what the function of ego or identity is to give motivation to everything, because now there's a character, and this character can accomplish things, so let's go out and do things. Now that there's a person defined here, a specific individual, and a sense of being a particular individual, then you'll get a sense of let's do stuff, let's accomplish stuff, let's get experience points, let's get loot, let's get stuff. Finally, the ability to host consciousness evolved, and the amalgam of sentience, Mahatattva, entered it. Now, if you're, I think Abhishek is the type of person who will have this type of question. But Vic, I thought that these things had previously evolved: mind, intellect. I thought that Ahankar was the first thing, Mahatattva, that it was the first thing. The ability for consciousness to exist or project into Maya or matter that already existed. Right. But what they're talking about here is how these things finally begin to bind together. So just like I said about the fascinating thing about evolution from a Vedic point of view is that the evolution of the design happens from the top or the most complex down. So the most complex thing is designed first, like this prototype life form, but then the implementation of it in historical evolution starts from the simplest up. And so you'll see that already in the fetus itself of the cosmic prototype. The simpler things bind first. And then once all of those are bound, then the intellect binds to them to process and control them. And then the mind binds to the intellect so that it can experience happiness or sadness based on what the intellect is processing. And then the ego finally binds to the mind to drive it to search for particular things to make it happy and avoid other things which make it unhappy. And then consciousness will be able to bind to the identity sensor through some kind of a conduit element, which is Mahatattva or Chitta. This is an interesting question from Melissa. Does the Bhagavatam spiral through the topics throughout, like the prototype being the Leelas and so on throughout the 12 cantos? It seems like we develop, kind of does. Just remember that it's not a book in the way that we're used to books. It's not like there's an author who wrote it and somebody edited it and then somebody published it. It starts off with Vishnu explaining things to Brahma, and then Brahma explains those same things to Narada, and then Narada explains the same things to Vyasa, and then Vyasa explains the same things to Shuka. Each time it gets bigger. Each time it gets more convoluted, because Vyasa is going to start explaining some things, and he's going to say, Narada explained this to me like this, and he's going to start quoting Narada, and Narada, while explaining it to Vyasa, is going to start quoting Brahma. So it's going to go back and forth and wiggle around, and then it's Shuka explaining to Parikshit, and then Sutta hears it, and then Sutta explains to Shonaka, and then you get commentaries on it afterwards, etc., etc. So the Bhagavatam isn't like a simple edited book that we're used to. It's more like a recording of a live stream, multiple live streams, reactions to live streams and things like that. So you do get spirally topic development. But you do tend to get things, just like you get in a conversation, you tend to get themes clustering in certain spots. So here in the first canto, second canto, third canto, which means part, and it's called a canto. Somebody decided to call it a canto, I think because it's kind of musical, the language. But in the first part, second part, third part, you get a lot of recurrence of the topic of how did the universe evolve? Where did it come from? What is it? That's kind of done by the third canto, and then you're going to move on to a new focus of topics. So you still hear it now and then in the remainder. And that the more you move towards Canto 10, the more you start to directly hear about Krishna. Abhishek says, I'm surprised to hear that motivation comes from ahankara. Ahankara is not soul. Ahankara is identity. Because it's classically the manas thing. Let me explain to you. The moon and the mind and the sun, the ego, have different functions. And actually, the moon is not motivated. What is a manly quality? The sun is strongly male and the moon is strongly female. Not purely, but pretty close to purely, male and female. So, what's the archetypical manly quality? Adventure, boldness, bravery, inception. Those are not archetypically female qualities. The female qualities are patience, reflection, care, carefulness, attention, reflection, self-awareness. Those are moony qualities. The reason is simply biological, because it's the way biologically the reproduction works. Is the male it begins the thing, and the female then takes it for a long time and develops it. So if you're going to think about since you know through astrology that the sun has the character of ahankar and the moon has the character of manas or mind, then if you're going to figure out where do my motivations start, if you think they start in your moon, you'll be a little bit short-sighted. They actually start in your identity. So for example, I have my daughter and a son. So the daughter wants a new dress. The son doesn't want a new dress. My son didn't even really want clothes. He wanted some other stuff. I can't remember right now because he's like 18, 16. Why is that? Why do they have different desires? Because they have different identities. One of the components of a person's identity is how they identify their gender. So based on your gender, it will shape. It doesn't ironclad translate, but it shapes your desire. Based on everything about your identity shapes the direction of your desire. So the moon and the mind is actually the desire machine. But the driver of that machine is the ego and the identity. If you think of yourself as a wealthy person, then you're going to have desires to earn wealth. If you think of yourself as somebody who doesn't care about wealth, you're not going to have desires to earn money. So the actual motivator is in the ahankar, not in the mind. But the two of them, one doesn't function without the other. The two are part of a chain of function of how you motivate. But when you break it down, the ahankar has the inception of the seed of all of the actions. Then which is the sun, and then the moon, which is the mind, has the desire, the passion to carry it. And then we'll also experience the reactions to the successes and failures. In other words, it'll feel happy and sad in relation to how well it's fulfilling the direction from the ego. And then the intellect is going to be the one telling the mind whether or not this is a success or a failure, whether or not this is good or bad. And then the senses are the one carrying it out. Okay. And I don't know what you mean that the moon is pally with Mars. Okay. I have an interesting footnote here. Let's read it. Much like in modern empirical sciences, the Bhagavatam states that life forms, intelligence, emotion, individual will, and the ability to host consciousness all gradually evolve successively as a result of complex combinations of simple material elements. That's a very interesting thing. that the vast majority of modern empirical sciences have come to the conclusion that life forms have evolved successively by simple things combining into less simple things, combining to more and more complex structures that eventually enable consciousness, right? So the Bhagavatam seems to be in the same ballpark or on the same page, generally speaking, as what human beings have over the past few centuries been able to figure out through their careful observations. There is a difference, however, between the modern claim and the modern theory and the Bhagavatam theory. The modern scientific theory, majority of it is just that evolution just happens. There's not a purpose to it, and there's no particular force guiding it. It happens by chance and luck. Or some portion of them will say, we don't know why it happens. We don't know how it happens. We don't care about that part. We just care about figuring out the details of it. What evolved into what, and how do we prove that? So that's the difference. Modern science is saying basically we don't care how or why it happened, or they just say it doesn't have a how. It doesn't have a why. It just happens by luck and by chance. Whereas, in contrast to that, the Bhagavatam says consciousness is at the root of everything that happens. Consciousness is the thing that defines reality. Consciousness is the experiencer. Consciousness wants to manifest form, so it's driving its matter component, its tangible component, to be able to do that. It drives its matter component to form shapes, to form structures. So it's overseeing and impelling. The consciousness is both impelling the evolution and overseeing the evolution. That's the difference between Bhagavatam and modern science. So actually, any details that you find in modern science don't really stand up as contradictions to the Bhagavatam's theme. It's really just the philosophical level on which the two are at odds. It's not in the actual evidence itself. So let's see. We can fit a little bit more in because today is Friday. Oh, and we only are at 22 minutes. So let's see what comes next. Now, Maitreya has explained how this fetus of the prototype became a viable living entity. Right now, it's got all the components of a life form. Now he's going to turn his attention to a different subject, not explaining how this thing developed, but explaining now how do the subsequent life forms which exist in the universe come from this thing. It's claimed that this life form is the prototype, the design template for all of the life forms. So now Maitreya is going to talk about which life forms adopt which characteristics from the universal prototype. So he says all life forms evolve from this original prototype life form. The brilliant gods, which are the devas, they evolved from its head, which manifests outer space where pensive sattva predominates. Interesting stuff. Sattva predominates in outer space. Why? Because there's nothing happening out there. It just is. And in comparison to on the planet. And then the gods dwell in outer space. What does that mean? They're in the nakshatras. Humans and lesser creatures they control evolved from its legs. Well, that's a big gap between the head and the legs. And those legs manifest the earth. So these creatures are going to develop places or environments to reside in. Cosmic being, the devas come and they figure out how to exist in the stars. From the feet and the legs come humans and animals. And they need to exist on a plane, so they get the earth. They manifest the earth. Great, Crystal. Destructive So, and on the earth, it's rajas. In space, it's primarily sattva, and the earth is primarily rajas because it's dominated by active life forms. And then destructive forces evolved from the middle. So you got devas, and then destructive forces like asuras, and then humans at the bottom, and animals down towards the feet. And the devas, they live in the sky, in the space. So I don't know how you want to visualize this or how inaccurate or accurate it will be. But the concept is bhubhuvasva. That there's the bhu is the place where most of the things exist. And it's the one that we're on right now. And then there's bhuva. There's a realm that's kind of connected to bhu, but a bit higher. Bhuva. And we typically translate that as sky. But whether it's not like there's people in the clouds. So it's more like there's a plane of existence. There's a reality which is kind of very similar to the earth, and it's in contact with the earth, and it affects the earth a lot, but it's not the earth. It's a bit above, and then there's Swa. Now, whether that means you can find the Orion gas nebula in it or not, I can't really say. But it's the outer space. It's far away. I just got a doorbell. I got distracted. Okay. And they say tamas is in the sky. Interesting. Vidura might want to know more details about human life forms, so Maitreya explained how 4 types of human beings evolved from the prototype life form. So it's not just, bam, the codes and everything that are in the legs generate the humans, which generate the earth, and the codes which are in the stomach generate the asuras, and the codes which are in the head generate the devas, and that's all there is to it. That's just a broad category. Then every creature is going to take something from everywhere in the structure of the universal life form. So even though humans are predominantly from the legs, some types of humans have some qualities from the head of the universal form, some from the arms, etc. So now he's going to explain that. Maitreya explained how 4 types of human beings evolved from the prototype life form. Its mouth generates words of wisdom, inspiring humans to evolve into intellectuals who guide society. So there's a certain class of human that are intellectual. There's 4 classical classes. And the key thing about the intellectual class is the ability to explain things. And that power is found in the mouth of the universal form. Its arms generate strength, inspiring humans to evolve into governors who should protect others from harm. So then you get the kind of people that want to be in control and keep everything in an order. That power that humans have comes from the prototype life form's arms. Then its loins generate fertility. So this is kind of funny. And there's all these businessmen, right? The loins generate fertility, inspiring humans to evolve into farmers involved in trade and business. So farmers, businessmen, producers of products, those come from the crotch of this. All their code, all their energy, all their nature, what makes them able to do what they do is found in the crotch of DNA of the prototype life form. Because they generate. And that's where all the generation is found. Its feet generated humble receptivity, the quality that leads to perfection and pleases Hari. It facilitated the evolution of the working class. So here you can see that the working class is referred to very positively because they're humble and receptive. And that is the most important thing when you're existing in ignorance and you need to receive guidance from the Veda. So simple people are also praised as well as intellectuals and powerful people. Although they play different roles. Hi, Catherine. Although they play different roles, all types of humans are equal in the sense that they can all worship their master Hari by performing their individual functions for the sake of attaining self-purification, not for the sake of earning a livelihood which comes automatically. So an interesting paragraph to stop at and just give a little bit of discussion. So the Vedic outlook is that there's 4 psychological types, which is going to translate into 4 behavioral types directly. So basically, let's just say there's 4 types of humans, categories of humans. And when I tell you the names in Sanskrit, you'll be like, oh my God, isn't that the caste system? Because this is the basis for the caste system. It's not the caste system. The caste system is a perversion of it. But the connection is there because this is the thing which was perverted into the caste system. The names of the 4 classes is Shudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Brahmana. And those are the 4 basic castes. Now, what's the difference between these 4 types? It's actually their guna and their karma that does the vibhaga. Chaturvarnyam mayashishtam guna karma vibhagasa, Gita said. So it's not the birth. That's how the caste system is a complication upon it and a perversion of this system. It's done by janma, or birth, that you belong to a particular caste. But the original concept is people are different, and you can categorize. It's just like personality tests. It's nothing more offensive than a personality test, where if you had a personality test that would categorize you into 1 of 4 groups. And it wouldn't, what kind of activities do you like to do? What kind of things grab your attention and keep your focus? What do you want to be in society? Those are the questions that would answer which type of person you are. So the Brahmana is the type of person that really wants to understand things and is able to explain what they understand secondarily. So that's one type of person. They're brain-oriented people. They're head-oriented people. They also want to understand things like arts. It's not like they're just scientists and mathematicians. Any kind of scholar. They can be a scholar of sex. There's, what's his name? Can't remember his name now, but the author of Kama Sutra is a Brahmana. The author of all these great researches, and people who study things in detail, they're always Brahmanas. Whatever they study might be different. Somebody might study how to play a flute. Somebody might study how to build a rocket ship. Somebody might study biology. Somebody might study sex. It's just different. But anybody that's intellectually oriented is in this category of Brahmana. And there's other category of people that feel like they want to control things. So they want to enforce laws, make sure people follow the laws. Right? So they classically become people like police, military, legislators, stuff like that. Of course, it's not hardly digital in between each class. There's bleed in between. So, if it's like a judge is like a Brahmana who's involved with Kshatriya, an intellectual of government. And then you could have a scholar of economics is obviously like a hybrid between Brahmana and Vaishya. But these are the pure classes. And then the third type of person is the people that are fascinated with resources. Like the Brahmana is fascinated with ideas. The Kshatriya is fascinated with power. And then the Vaishya, who's the business person, is fascinated with resources. So they're very, very inspired to create resources and amass resources and distribute resources. So you get capitalists, merchants, farmers. And then the fourth class of person is a person that doesn't really have a strong motivation at all, not for resources, not for ideas, and not for power. They're just pretty humble. And it's the mass of the people who are like that. They don't have remarkable trait of any sort. 75% at least of the people aren't remarkable in any particular way. And so that forms the fourth class of people. They don't really do much on their own, but they do. Other people, the other 3 classes, can employ them. And then they can work on the direction of the other 3 classes, so they can become attached to the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, or Vaishyas, and be employed in their service to do just so. It's like employees. It's like the employee class, the people that get a salary and they work. They're not entrepreneurs, they're not idealists, and they're not politicians. So those are the four things. And then what it says here is they all play a different role, and you need all the roles, just like on a cosmic being. You need the head. So you need the head. You need the arms. You need the stomach, or the genitals, and you need the legs. If the genitals stop working, it's not great. If the legs stop working, it's not great, right? So all four types of people have an indispensable role to play in society, and therefore each one is respected for their role. So it's not like because you are in the Vedic outlook, the true Vedic outlook, it wouldn't be like, well, you're just a normal person, bah. But you're a normal person, that's great. Do your stuff. Be employed by Brahmana, Vaishya, or Kshatriya. Do your thing for society. We need you. Oh, you're a Brahmana. That's amazing. We really need you to direct everybody else. So everybody is supposed to be valued for their contribution that they as an individual make to society. And nobody is supposed to be stressed or pushed or pressured into not being who they are. And no person in Vedic culture thinks this person has no contribution to make to society. Even people who are vicious and violent have a contribution to make to society. You stick them in an army and you go send them to fight your enemies. So people are encouraged and glorified to be who they are. And the way it's said here is they all play different roles. All types of humans are equal, not in the sense that they're the same, because they're not the same. A guy who can understand music theory is not the same as a guy who can only understand how to build a wall. They're not the same on that level, but they are the same because they can all contribute to society. And that's what's actually being said by worshiping the master. The means of worshiping the master is that Vishnu himself has created this world so that living entities can live in it peacefully and happily. And so assisting in that scheme is a service to Vishnu. So it's a way of worshiping Vishnu, is to play your social role nicely. So that's why they further explain they can all worship their master Hari by performing their individual functions for this. And then the thing that actually makes it a service to Hari rather than just a good karma is that if you perform their individual actions for that sake, for the sake of attaining self-purification, Maitreya says here, for the sake of Vishnu, for the sake of keeping oneself in service to Vishnu, one does the role that they have, be it in these four classes or any of the subclasses. Any of the specifics, like, well, you're an astrologer, so you study astrology, learn it good. Are you a musician? Well, then get good. Please people, delight people, make inspiring music. So doing that for the sake of the role that it plays in Vishnu's design is self-purification, and it's glorious, and everybody can do that. Therefore, everybody's equal, and that's the most important thing. Not for the sake of earning a livelihood, which comes automatically. That's really interesting, too. The livelihood comes automatically, according to what you deserve. As long as you don't do anything bad to other people, and as long as you haven't done anything bad to other people, then your livelihood will just come automatically, as long as you haven't blocked it from coming to other people. And so therefore, you can also just reverse that and do good things, like giving charity to other people. That will erase the negative things that you've done or counteract the negative things. So it will allow simple things like livelihood, food, shelter, money to just come on its own. So what he said, part of the thing is here, you don't have to use your natural individual talents for a livelihood. you have to use your natural individual talents to please Vishnu by making society a better place where people can be happier and more progressive and more healthy and whole. When you do that, then the livelihood part comes automatically. And everybody is valuable in doing that. Nobody has to be somebody else. Everybody can contribute to that from exactly where they are and who they are right now. Okay? Any questions? Well, then we're at Friday, aren't we? So let's have a great weekend. And then I'll see you on Monday. For an interesting. You know what? How much time do we have? Here, I'll just end this with this last session. So we'll end chapter 6. My dear Vidura, Maitreya concluded, this form of the all-attractive contains the destiny of the entire cosmos. So this one entity contains the karma for the whole cosmos. But it arises only by the strength of its own internal potency. We cannot describe it perfectly. It contains the destiny of the cosmos, but it wasn't produced by the destiny of the cosmos. It was produced by its will. It was produced by Vishnu's own will. Still, my friend, for the sake of purifying my own impure voice, I narrate this kirtan to you, explaining as much as I can comprehend of whatever I can hear about the glories of Hari. It is said our words can achieve no greater fortune than to speak about he whose beauty is the root of the most exquisite poetry. The greatest fortune of the ears is to fill themselves deeply with ambrosial words about Hari, spoken by the wise. My dear child, even the original poet, Brahma, couldn't comprehend the greatness of that being, even after striving by perfect mystic intelligence for 1,000 celestial years. So what can be said about lesser poets? The enchanting mysteries of the all-attractive bewilder mystified souls and liberated souls alike. Indeed, even he himself does not fully comprehend his own limitlessness. Unable to grasp him fully, the words, minds, and egos of all the gods fall silent. They simply fold their hands to him and say, Namaste. Namaste means we are nothing compared to you. We're not important compared to you. That's what the word namaste means. It doesn't mean I worship the unborn such and such within you. That's some kind of, I don't know who made that up. Namaste means na aham te, tu, you. Not me, you. That's what namaste means. Or not me to you or unto you. Unto you, I'm not. Unto you, I'm not important. It's not me in front of you. It's you. That's what namaste means. Okay. So next time we'll start with chapter 7, which is Vidura's questions about all the stuff that he's heard so far. All right, guys. See you on Monday.